Well, the U.S. is facing a host of issues on the world stage, including China aggression and Russia's war on Ukraine. Former VP Mike Pence is back with us now. Mr. Vice President, I think a huge question on that debate stage will eventually be, how do you confront China? And how far are you willing to go? There have been other candidates on this program, even Vivek Ramaswamy, who said he would go as far as to ban U.S. corporations from doing business in China until she met certain requirements by the United States. How far are you willing to go?
Well, Sandra, first, you're absolutely right. I mean, the greatest economic and strategic threat the United States of America faces today is from communist China. But the way we meet that moment is with American strength. I mean, the reality is the Biden administration has been cutting our military at a time that China is literally floating a new battleship every month. We see the ongoing provocations by the Chinese military. You saw it in the air. You saw it with that near pass of a ship in the South China Sea. But I have met President Xi. I know what the language there is strength. And if we make the right investments in our national defense, if we maintain our commitment to freedom of navigation and to supporting our allies in the region, I think it's the best pathway forward to peace. I also think, Sandra, that America's willingness to continue to lead and to provide the Ukrainian military the support they need until they repel the Russian invasion not only is a win in Eastern Europe, but it sends the message that we want to send to China that we will not allow, that the Western world and the United States will not allow nations to redraw international lines by force.
Mr. Vice President, closer to home, you have long said that border security is national security. If you become president, what would you do about the situation at the border? And would you also work with Congress on comprehensive immigration reform?
Well, John, first and foremost is we would put back into place on day one the policies of the Trump-Pence administration. I negotiated the Remain in Mexico agreement with the Mexican delegation, the one that required people to wait in Mexico that just went by the boards because of this administration. But Joe Biden on day one shut down construction of the border wall. They've been denying funding increases to our border patrols. I just talked to someone here in Iowa who told me they were just there this week. And our Border Patrol is candid. The cartels have operational control of our border. So the first thing you do is you secure the border, you build the wall, you restore Remain in Mexico, you put Title 42 back into place. And then, frankly, we do need to reform our immigration system. You know, the term comprehensive immigration reform, I'm not a fan. That usually means some form of amnesty. But I think we can fix a broken immigration system to make it work for this and future generations if we build it on merit and on the needs of the American people. When my grandfather came to this country through Ellis Island, John, he had to first certify as a tailor, as a clothes maker, before he could go through Ellis Island and immigrate to be an American. We need a merit-based system that says, what are the needs of the American economy, and then create an orderly way for people to come here under the law.
You mentioned the needs of the American economy. It's something you and I have spoken about a lot over the years, Mr. Vice President. And poll after poll shows that American voters attribute this historic inflation crisis that we've all been living through to massive levels of government spending. Right. How do you promise the American voter fiscal responsibility, that you're going to rein in that government spending that is causing these high prices?
Well, let's remember where this started. So Joe Biden comes into office, and in the first few months, Sandra, he signs a $2 trillion COVID bill that was completely unnecessary. I was glad to see House Republicans vote to turn some of that off. But that's what lit the pilot light on the worst inflation in 40 years. And it has put a tremendous burden on American families. And so the first thing that we have to do is end all the unnecessary spending that's occurred. I think we ought to freeze non-defense domestic spending at current levels. But as I said here today, while Joe Biden and Donald Trump have the exact same position on entitlement reform, I think we got to be honest with the American people. 70% of the federal budget that's driven a national debt the size of our nation's economy is driven by our entitlement programs. We need to preserve them, Social Security and Medicare, for Americans that depend on them today and will depend on them in the next quarter century. But I think to stave off a mountain range of debt and to head off inflation that's hurting families today, we need to engage the American public in a conversation about common sense and compassionate reforms. As I like to say, for younger Americans under the age of 40, we can replace these New Deal programs with a better deal for every American.
Mr. Vice President, let me come back to your route to the White House and a couple of things that you said in the speech here. You said, as your vice president, I stood by President Donald Trump every single day when we made America great. But then talking about January 6th, you said the American people deserve to know that on that fateful day, President Trump also demanded I choose between him and our Constitution. Now, voters will be faced with the same choice. I choose the Constitution, and I always will. There are many Republicans who applaud you for what you did on January 6th and standing up in the face of a lot of pressure for the Constitution. But there are also a fairly significant number of Republicans who count themselves as Trump supporters who will never forgive you for that day. What do you say to those people?
Well, I said to them what I said today. When I put my hand on Ronald Reagan's Bible on January 20th, 2017, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And a clear reading of the Constitution, which I actually recited today in my speech, made my responsibilities that day, that fateful day of January 6th, quite clear. That once states had certified elections, once Congress had considered objections, the job I had as a presiding officer that day and vice president was to oversee a process to open and count. The Constitution actually says you shall open and shall count the votes of the Electoral College certified by the states. I thought it was important today just to be straight with the American people, because I think there's nothing more important than having a president of the United States who will respect and honor and defend the Constitution of the United States, whether it's in their interest or not. I mean, we've had generations of Americans who've worn the uniform of the United States. My son's a captain in the Marine Corps. Our son-in-law is a lieutenant in the Navy. They take the very same oath, John, and I wanted to deal with it head on today here in Iowa. And as we take our case across this state and across the country, I'm going to engage every American, because I will tell you, I truly do believe, whatever people may believe about that, that as more and more Americans see and understand what our duty was that day, that our party, a party that loves the Constitution, I think is going to embrace leadership that did just that.
To follow up on John's question, Mr. Vice President, for those Republicans who cast you aside after Donald Trump's loss in 2020, how are you planning to repair your image with them?
Well, look, I'm going to continue to talk about the issues that are important to the American people, Sandra. Look, this country's in a lot of trouble. I mean, the American people are struggling. The world's becoming more dangerous by the day. And we have not only my former running mate, but we have many candidates in the field that are walking away from a time-honored conservative agenda that has always made America strong and prosperous and free. And whatever people may think about decisions that I've made in the past, decisions I made that in my heart of hearts I believe were consistent with my oath, I truly do believe that by focusing on what the American people are focused on, which, as you said at the start of this segment, is a struggling economy, is an increasingly dangerous world, is an ongoing assault on our liberties, a crisis on our border, a flood of fentanyl in our communities. I truly do believe that we'll have the opportunity to speak to people around the country, and I promise you we're going to work our hearts out to do just that.
When it comes to those bread and butter issues, Mr. Vice President, of course, inflation is still looming out there, very difficult to get under control. Right. Should you take the Oval Office, what would you do to get inflation under control? Would you have a heavier hand with the Federal Reserve than this president?
Well, look, 10 years ago, John, I wrote a bill to end what's called the dual mandate of the Federal Reserve. I mean, for about the last 40 years, the Federal Reserve has, in addition to protecting the integrity of the dollar, they've also had a mission to promote full employment. Well, I think full employment should be on the president's desk. I think full employment should be on the Congress's desk. I'd like to see the Federal Reserve just simply get back to its knitting, to protecting the integrity of the dollar and fighting inflation, and then start to promote policies at the federal level that'll get the economy growing again. We can do it. We proved it in those early years of the Trump-Pence administration. We cut taxes, roll back regulation, unleash American energy, achieve energy independence. You take 3 steps back, America's going to come roaring back. Add to that a commitment to fiscal responsibility and reform, and I promise you the best days of America are yet to come.
Mr. Vice President, I want to ask you also about something that you've made very publicly clear is very important to you, and that is your faith, along with your wife, Karen, who's standing beside you. And more we see show up in these polls, the pessimism for America and the negative outlook that so many Americans have right now, the decline in the American dream. And a big part of that is the loss of faith, the declining faith and belief in God. A new Gallup shows hitting a record low in this country. The evangelical vote, obviously very relevant standing in Iowa, the evangelical vote was an extremely important part of the Trump-Pence vote back in 2016. What can you promise them? How are you going to bring faith back to America? And how can you inspire some more optimism?
Well, Sandra, I'll tell you, the end of my speech, I just encourage people, reminding them of our storied history, that to believe in this country again. You know, I think the American people have always been a great people. We just have to have government as good as our people. A careful study of history shows that every time the American people have been called upon to do hard things, we always rise to the challenge. But I do think that faith, that belief as Americans that we're endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights is at the very heart of the American experiment. And look, I will always stand for the freedom of people to believe or not to believe according to the dictates of their faith and conscience. But for me and my house, we'll always be open about our faith. But we want to be respectful and gentle. People that know us know, as I like to say, I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. And I truly do believe that simply in the course of our career, that people knowing that we're a family that prays, we're a family that spends time in devotions, has been an encouragement to many believers around the country. And we won't hide that under a bushel basket, I promise you. And I hope it'll be an encouragement to many Americans as well. I think we turn our hearts back to that wellspring of faith. If we renew our confidence in the American people, we'll see that pessimism dissipate like a fog in a bright light of American optimism.
Mr. Vice President, just before we go, one other big issue that promises to be one of the ones at the forefront of the 2024 campaign is abortion. Would you support going back to, as Lindsey Graham wants to, a federal law on abortion?
Oh, sure. I think, look, you got to recognize that in the European Union, 12 to 15 weeks is very much the standard. Our abortion laws today at the federal level are more like China, North Korea, and Iran. So I would certainly support a 15-week ban at the federal level, and I commend the congressmen and senators that have supported that. But I've also been a champion of the right to life my whole life, and I'm going to continue to encourage states around the country to advance the cause of life. And whatever the future holds for our little family, we'll never rest, we'll never relent until we do our part to restore the sanctity of life to the center of American law.
All right, Mr. Vice President Mike Pence, fresh off your big announcement just a short time ago on the ground there in Iowa. We appreciate you joining us here today.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.